Okay, so you do. So then, at least you are agreeing that Jewish people are just born smarter.
Yeah, they're very high IQ. I don't know that they're smarter than white people, but
So you have to. That's what the results say.
that's what some results say. Depends on what results you're looking at.
Okay, I thought that was kind of the. Maybe I'm just reading it in one term, but I'm pretty sure that I read somewhere that like Ashkenazis have the highest IQs.
They like to embellish that, and there's different kinds of IQ. I think Chinese people probably have the highest IQ, Chinese or Japanese.
But how do you pick and choose what you believe and what you don't believe, and then form a basis? Like, well, I definitely believe that black people are dumb, but I totally don't
Oh, come on now.
necessarily believe. I'm obviously being a little bit hyperbolic here.
Mm.
But I totally don't necessarily believe that Ashkenazis are the smartest. Like, how do you?
Well, I said they're probably among the smartest races. As to who's the smartest, it's tough to say. And I think that Jewish people do embellish that for obvious reasons. Now, there are some studies that say that Ashkenazi Jews do have the highest average IQ, and that does exist.
Yeah, but so then for
I'm
me,
skeptical
the
of it.
reason why I'm skeptical of it all, to be honest with you, is because I'm skeptical of history. Full stop.
Mm.
Right. So when you're like, well, this is what
What do
we
you mean,
did.
all of history? Or
Skeptical of history, full stop, because we're living in a present right now where they're lying about what happened yesterday. And
Mhm.
then when I realized, like, when you completely remove something that would obviously inform our perspectives in a different way, as I covered on my show this week, like the Havara agreement between the Zionists
Mhm.
and the Nazis, like that's kind of a pretty big thing to not teach people in school.
Mhm.
That would maybe inform and make us ask some questions. When you totally remove like a German genocide and only focus on one genocide, or don't focus on speaking about the Bolshevik Revolution, I don't question. I now have a lot of questions about history, full stop.
Mhm.
And so he who prints the textbook is king. And
Agreed.
so if you are coming up with a concept like, well, this is an immutable trait, and I know because I read or I learned this at school, or this textbook, or I read this book, he who prints the textbook is king. And I'm kind of learning that right now in terms of Hollywood Babylon, the relationship that the deep state has had with publishing agencies for a reason. You know this, I know this. You can't even get your book published.
Right.
If you want to get your book published because they're controlling the press, that's kind of been a running theme. Certainly was the reason why the Russian Tsar, they were pamphleteers at that time, but like certainly was the reason that he got overthrown, was that they realized the power of the press.
Mhm.
And so when people have perspectives like you and they're base it on like historical knowledge, this person invented the wheel. I'm like, I don't really know what's up and
Mm.
what's down, to be honest with
Mm.
you. I don't even believe in the moon landing. So,
Tartaria.
there you go. There's another one. There's something there.
We
That's very funny.
was.
I would.
Not kidding.
But the point being is that, yeah, so the more that I learn, the one thing that I learn is that we know very little. And so I would never make a sweeping conclusion like that confidently. It could
Mm.
be that some groups are more evil.
Mhm.
They're
Yeah.
willing to
Well.
do stuff that you wouldn't do. They're willing to take your entire culture, your ideas, and purport that it was theirs.
Mm.
And that's something that we're kind of tackling in my book club right now, because we're realizing that the elites very much believed in this sort of Kabbalistic sexual ritual magic, but actually they stole it from Egyptians.
Mm.
And like Sigmund Freud was obsessed with the Egyptians, and we talked about Aleister Crowley. And so the more I learn about what they were obsessed with, I'm like, okay, so you're supposed to be like the brightest people in the world and you've had wealth forever. But I think you're willing to to do more that most people that just have like a discerning, I don't know, just have the Holy Spirit, like just wouldn't do.
Mhm.
And so does the most evil person get to the top? And then they get to say, well, we're just like what's going to happen, for example, bring it back to what we've been discussing. And I will give a specific example. I won't even mince words here. It shocked me to learn that Armand Hammer, you know Armand Hammer, the
Mhm.
actor,
Yeah.
he is racially Jewish. No, they sometimes it's race, sometimes it's ethnicity, sometimes it's religion, who knows? But Armie Hammer's family backstory is that his however many great grandfathers named Armand Hammer was named Arm and Hammer, literally.
Hmm.
Okay. Because he was considered Stalin and Vladimir Lenin's favorite Jew. Okay. Fascinating. And so what he would do is he would go between Russia and America. He would set up like all of these. His father was Julius Hammer, and he established the Diamond District. So you're telling me that when Christians were being mass murdered and their belongings were being taken, you got these guys going back and forth, establishing districts in America. They're peddling art. He started peddling art. He started peddling diamonds. I think that's stolen.
Mm.
Okay. So if our American history is going to teach us that, like, oh, like the reason they established Arm and Hammer's fortune is like they opened all these art galleries, it's stolen. You stole this from Christians that were being murdered and had all their stuff taken. we can apply that logic to what's happening in Palestine. Everyone thinks about, okay, it's very clearly what's happening is an ethnic cleansing. Where's all that stuff going? Are we going to in the future go, well, Palestinians just couldn't get ahead because,
Mhm.
they're just not that smart.
Mhm.
Fundamentally, if you look at the IQ of Palestinian, the reason why they got ahead is because they weren't that smart and the Israelis were just really smart, or no, the Israelis were just evil.
Mm.
And so I am not comfortable with the conclusion that you have arrived at because I just pay attention to what's happening now and what limited research that I've done. I'm like, well, some people are just a little more evil. Like
Yeah.
they'll rewrite the books and 50, maybe 100 years from now, they're going to say the Palestinians never had that land. And it was really a matter of people lying and it was anti Semitic and we'll be none the wiser.
Right.
Fair?
I disagree. I just fundamentally disagree. I think that, it's such a one-sided, it's unfortunate, but it's so one-sided, just a chronic lack of development and persistent underclass status and lack of contributions to mankind. I mean, certainly in the arts and in athletics, but no inventions, no philosophers, no true great masterpieces, anything like that. In terms of fine art, really. And then you have the whole planet is like this. I mean, if half of Africa was super developed or halfway developed and the other half wasn't, maybe you'd have an argument. But it's whether they're socialist or capitalist, whether they got colonized or not, whether they got freed from slavery in 1800 or in 1860, or it's the same story everywhere. There's not one written language among them. You talk about who controls the printing press. They don't have books. They don't have words to put in the books. And I think that, you know, it's a sad fact of the world, but it's something we have to deal with. And to me, that's the only conclusion that satisfies. And don't get me wrong, I get where you're coming from. I'm not, I'll give you an example. My family lived in Chicago for 4 or 5 generations. And my parents and my grandmother, they had a security firm in the city. They taught cops and security guards how to shoot their guns and gave them licenses and things like that. And almost all their clientele were black. And when I was growing up, this was impressed upon me at an early age. They always said the older generations in Chicago, when my grandmother was growing up in the
Mhm.
projects, when my parents were running this business in the 80s and 90s, they said they were the most polite, the most pious, the most considerate.
Right.
Some of them couldn't read though. They would come in and not be able to read, but they were more they were less dysfunctional than my family. My grandmother, her mother had mental illness, and she would look outside the window in the projects and see a black family across the way, and they were sitting around the table holding hands saying grace, and it was an intact family. So I completely agree with you. Obviously there's a cultural destruction. Obviously there's a cultural decline, but I think that was constant, even though the older generation was more genteel. I think that honestly, that came from oppression. That came from a society where they were the minority. There was racism, there was abuse, there was segregation. And I think that made black people meek. And if you look, the out of wedlock birth rate started to blow up, not after Great Society in the late 60s, but in the 50s during the Civil Rights era. And I think that that was sort of a regression to the mean moment. And again, I think that it's not that black people can't be good people. There aren't smart black people, or there aren't, incredible black people. I'm sitting across from one right now, or yay, and everything like that. But on the whole, on average, and there's billions of black people, they do have that lower level of development. And I think that's why they underperform. And, you
Yeah,
know,
I think it's totally ignorant. We can disagree on that, but I think it would be the same as saying like we look at women today who are all a bunch of hoes,
mhm.
and like that's kind of just become the thing. Like this is what women are, and then kind of looking at this moment in time and saying like this is just who they are. It's like women as soon as they come of age, they just want to like be on screen shaking their butts because they're all low IQ and they need men to do this or whatever. It's like no, the culture has been corroding for a very long time, and I don't accept the argument that it's because women are women and that's just who they all are deep down on the inside. I find that
Mhm.
I do think that um in time you might move away from that.
Okay. I'm,
Yeah,
I'm
we'll see.
open minded.
We'll
Yeah.
see. Okay, so you are a racist. You accept that. You are anti-Semitic. I don't like actually using that word because even that is what I mean, like trickery, where it's like Semitic. Palestinians are Semitic,
Right.
so it's nothing more anti-Semitic than blowing up Palestinians. Are you a Jew hater?
No, I don't hate
Do you
anybody.
hate Jews?
I don't hate Jews. I don't hate anybody.
You don't hate anybody.
Mm.
Okay. And your faith, you don't find that saying that you're a Catholic while also saying that you don't believe that whites and blacks should be married, or you don't believe in interracial marriage for whatever reason, that doesn't conflict with your Catholicism?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, but you said that like that's not a Catholic perspective.
It's not a sin. The Catholic Church doesn't say it's a sin
Mhm.
to mix races, but there have been various Catholic authors that have said that it's not conducive to a long-term marriage to mix races because you have this clash, you have this dissonance between cultures, between different upbringings. And so they say if the selfless goal of a marriage is to rear children
Mhm.
and you want to make that as conducive as possible, then you should marry within your race. It's not a sin if
Which
you don't.
Catholic author?
I don't know off the top of my head, but there are Catholic theologians that have said that it's not conducive to a long-term marriage and stable.
Okay, jumping in here, even though he didn't say that he would produce a document, I thought it was important to fact check this one, obviously, because I don't want people to walk away with a perspective that it's a Catholic teaching or a Catholic idea or Catholic theology that people shouldn't be marrying outside of their race. So I gave him an opportunity and told him it was important to me if he could supply us with the name or the reading. And this is what he came back with that we were able to fact check as being an accurate quotation from Thomas Aquinas. The quotation reads, "It is less fitting to marry one who is far removed from us in customs and manners, lest the mutual fellowship be hindered." Doesn't say anything about race. I certainly don't disagree with that whatsoever. And so I am not clear on how that could be interpreted as being about race. But again, the only reason I wanted to fact check that is because it's really important for people who are obviously having faith based discussions to know that that is not a Catholic perspective. All right, let's get back into the conversation.
And by the way, the statistics bear this out. There's more mental illness, more domestic abuse in mixed race households. It depends on which ones. Some are worse than others in terms of the statistics. But obviously, I mean, look, at the end of the day, elephant in the room is you're a black woman in a mixed marriage. So obviously, we
No,
have different
I'm interested.
beliefs on
If
this.
we don't, yeah, listen. I'm never going to obviously adopt your beliefs on it.
Right.
I just think it's patently wrong.
But do you understand why I would want to have grandchildren that are white?
I don't have an issue with you
And-
saying you want your kids to
But
look
do you
like
understand why I would believe that or feel that way?
No, because I'm not white. I don't understand.
What about your grandchildren being black for that matter then?
Well, I'm mixed race, so that I mean, I just feel like each kid comes out looking different. It's kind of incredible. So I think that when you actually have children, you realize like it's incredible how like my daughter is a little bit darker,
Mm-hmm.
but she looks like my husband, and then like my son's whiter, but he looks just like me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of one of the exciting parts of being in a mixed race relationship. I'm always like, oh, I wonder what this kid's going to come out looking like. If you're saying that generations down, like 3 generations down, it'd be possible that you could just have all black kids or something, would that bother you? You'll probably be dead. Before
Yeah,
that
but
happens, you'll probably be dead.
I'm alive
But-
now, and I
No,
don't
but
love
I'm
the
saying is
idea.
that like by the time you could breed it out, so to speak,
Mhm.
you'd be dead. So I'm just answering your question. Like it doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
No, obviously not.
I'm saying, but do you understand why I would feel that way?
if I understood it, I wouldn't be in a mixed race relationship. I don't understand it.
But you
but
have
I
no
accept
empathy
it.
then for like
No,
you can't step outside of your
no, I kind
situation.
of no. I mean, no, I'm not. I don't need to have. How would I have empathy for it? I mean, I don't. I don't feel that way.
Okay.
So it's just something that we disagree on.
Well,
which is fine.
I'm saying that because I actually can understand the appeal of a mixed race relationship. I get it. I mean, I find other races attractive also. And, you know, if I was in love with a person from another race, I would probably want to build a life with them also. But my values are not just who I'm in love with and things like that. It's also my heritage, my identity, my race. And, you know, I like the idea. It is important to me. My parents look a certain way. Their parents look a certain way. We come from a certain place. I like the unbroken chain. And I want my grandchildren and great grandchildren to have a similar complexion. I want them to have similar hair. I want, you know, because these kinds of things, they echo. We're all connected, not just in time horizontally, but vertically across the generations. And so the idea that, you know, 2 or 3 generations down the line, one of my children bears no resemblance to me at all, it's almost as if we're not related. It's almost as if I never existed. And there's something very disturbing to me about that. And I can understand why people are okay with that. You know, because people have various feelings about race. They say, I don't care about my race or whatever, but I do.
Okay, that's totally fine. And like I said, it's not a Catholic doctrinal perspective.
Yeah.
It's your perspective. You're entitled to it. You can marry whoever you want. That's the point. It's a free country. But would you make the argument that it should be legislative?
No, I don't think it should be legislated at all.
Okay.
No.
It's just your perspective. Yeah.
It's my value.
Listen,
I
by the
value it.
way, You're allowed to have a type. That's one of the things I think I don't personally care if people tell me I'm not attracted to black women, I'm not attracted to Spanish women, whatever it is. Do your thing. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? That's the reason why you're allowed to be you and I'm allowed to be me.